We grow up being told to follow in the footsteps of giants, to walk the paths of those who came before us. But Law 41 flips that completely. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes.
Because when you do, you don't just inherit the path, you inherit the shadow. And no matter what you build, it will always be measured against someone else's legend.
That's the trap. You think you're honoring greatness by continuing it, but in truth, you're suffocating under it. You lose your voice, your edge, your identity.
And it's not just about legacy in the historical sense. This happens in families, companies, relationships. You enter a space built by someone else, and now you're expected to be them.
But Greene says power doesn't come from continuation. It comes from distinction, from creating your own imprint, even if it means dismantling what came before.
And that's hard, because the world loves nostalgia. People want the next version of the same legend, not someone who disrupts the story.
But real influence doesn't come from imitation. It comes from reinvention. If you simply maintain the legacy, you become a placeholder, not a presence.
So this law is a warning against comfort, against the prestige trap, that feeling of, if I just step into this established role, I'll be respected. No, you'll be compared.
And comparison kills innovation, because you're not being judged on what you are, you're being judged on how close you come to someone else's myth.
That's why stepping into a great man's shoes is so dangerous. It looks like an honor, it feels like power, but it's actually limitation, unless you redefine the space.
And to do that, you have to detach from their image, their rules, their story. You don't continue it, you interrupt it deliberately.
Because only then can people stop comparing you and start recognizing you. This law applies especially in leadership. You see someone step into a role after a legendary figure, a founder, a CEO, a political icon, and instantly expectations crush them.
Because no matter how capable they are, the question always lingers. Are they as good as the one before? And just like that, they're not leading, they're defending.
And the moment you're defending, you're no longer innovating. You're no longer free. You're just protecting someone else's legacy, while yours never gets a chance to form.
That's why Greene says, what happens first always appears better and more original than what comes after. It's a psychological trap. The first defines the frame, and the second lives inside it.
So what do? You disrupt the frame. You don't step into the same shoes, you walk a new path, even if that means starting with less status, less certainty, less comfort.
Because that discomfort, that's the birthplace of originality. It's where you're forced to build, not borrow, and people respect builders more than maintainers.
Look at Steve Jobs. He didn't continue IBM's legacy. He built a different narrative entirely. Minimalism, rebellion, design-driven tech. It wasn't an evolution, it was a rupture.
Exactly. And that rupture is what made Apple iconic. He didn't imitate the greats. He reframed what great could mean. And that's what this law demands.
But let's be real. That's scary, because the path is unpaved. There's no blueprint, no legacy to lean on. You have to trust your instinct more than you trust tradition.
And most people don't. They crave the security of a model, even if that model limits them. They fear failure more than they crave uniqueness.
But in the world of power, safety is an illusion. Imitation doesn't protect you, it dilutes you. And dilution is death for anyone trying to lead.
So the law is clear. If you want to matter, you can't be the next version of someone else. You have to be the only version of you.
So let's make it practical. How do you know you've stepped into someone else's shoes without realizing it?
Good question. One sign is when people constantly compare you. You remind me of, or they used to do it this way. You're not seen for your vision, only for your resemblance.
Another sign is self-editing. You start suppressing your instincts, your style, your voice, just to maintain the system they left behind. You become a curator instead of a creator.
And it's subtle. You might think you're being respectful, but what you're actually doing is playing small in the name of preservation.
That's the silent killer of potential, imitation dressed up as loyalty. You're not honoring them, you're erasing yourself.
And if you're constantly afraid of offending their memory or deviating from their way, you're no longer leading, you're ghost managing.
That's why this law is so liberating. It gives you permission to reinvent, not just the role, but the rules.
And that reinvention doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's just shifting the narrative from "I'm here to fill their shoes" to "I'm here to build my own path."
Because even legends were once disruptors. The great man you're trying to imitate, he probably broke the mold in his time. That's what made him great.
Exactly. So to truly honor that spirit, you have to break your own ground. You don't continue the revolution, you start the next one.
And that takes confidence, not in being better, but in being different, in trusting that what makes you you is enough.
Here's the irony. The moment you stop trying to be the next so-and-so, people finally start to see your power, because now there's no frame to measure you against.
And you start attracting loyalty not out of nostalgia, but out of inspiration. People follow originality, even if it scares them at first.
So, Law 41 isn't a rejection of legacy, it's a reclamation of voice. You don't dishonor the great man, you just refuse to be his echo.
This law shows up everywhere, not just in history books or corporate boardrooms. It's in families, in creative work, in relationships. We're constantly stepping into roles shaped by others.
Absolutely. Take family businesses. You inherit the company, or even just the family name, and suddenly you're expected to lead like your father did, or run things like your mother did.
And if you try to change the way things are done, you're called ungrateful, disloyal. But if you just maintain the status quo, you vanish under their legacy.
So you're stuck, unless you reframe the story. Unless you say, yes, I inherited this, but now I'm evolving it.
Same with creative fields. Artists copying their mentors, musicians trying to be the next big thing by sounding just like the last one. You might get recognition, but you'll never get reverence.
Because reverence only comes from originality, and that means risk. That means stepping off the path, even if that path is gold-plated.
That's the hard truth. Safe paths don't create great impact. They create replicas, comfortable ones, forgettable ones.
And in relationships, this law is just as real. You date someone who's constantly referencing their ex, comparing, measuring, expecting you to fit a mold. You're not a partner, you're a replacement.
And what happens? You shrink. You try to match an invisible standard, but you never feel enough because you're not them, and you're not supposed to be.
So the powerful move isn't to compete with ghosts, it's to dismantle the pedestal. Not to disrespect the past, but to stop living under its shadow.
And when you do that, you allow yourself to be seen, fully, not as the next version, but as the first version of who you truly are.
That's when power shifts. That's when people stop comparing and start paying attention.
Because now, you're not repeating a story, you're writing a new one that only you could tell, and that's unforgettable.
Let's talk about the fear behind this law, because that's what really holds people back. It's not just admiration for the great man, it's the fear of not being enough without his blueprint.
Exactly. When you step into a role once held by someone powerful, iconic, beloved, you inherit the pressure, the silence in the room when people look at you and wonder, can they fill the space?
And that fear makes people conform. They imitate to survive, but in doing so, they become invisible because no one remembers the copy.
The tragedy is that so many people could be great, but they waste that energy trying to be great like someone else. And that's a slow death of individuality.
You end up chasing a ghost, not even a person, a legacy. And legacies are illusions. They grow bigger in memory than they ever were in life.
That's why breaking the mold is so vital, even if people don't get it at first, even if they resist, because eventually they adjust and they respect the courage it takes to stand alone.
And here's the twist. When you stand alone long enough, you become the reference. You become the one people compare others to.
But that only happens if you stop measuring yourself against someone else's greatness. You have to rewrite the scale and base it on your values, your instincts, your design.
That means embracing difference. Not just accepting that you're not like the great man, but being proud of it, owning the contrast.
Because that contrast is your leverage. That contrast is what makes people say, we've never seen it done that way before.
And at first, it might make them uncomfortable, even hostile, but disruption always does, and still, it's necessary.
So instead of asking, am I living up to their legacy? Start asking, am I building something that can stand on its own?
That's when power shifts, from borrowed to earned, from imitation to innovation.
So here's the truth. You don't honor a legacy by mimicking it. You honor it by expanding what's possible, by making sure the story doesn't end with them.
Exactly. You don't fill their shoes, you build a new path. And when people look back, they won't say you were the next someone. They'll say you were the first you.
And that's the mark of real power. Not continuation, but creation. Not imitation, but identity.
Because there's a fine line between respect and restriction, between being inspired by someone and being trapped by their shadow.
This law is an invitation to step out of the shadow, to break the pedestal, to stop performing greatness and actually live it on your own terms.
And that shift, it's not always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet refusal, a small change in direction, a single no that opens the door to something entirely new.
But once you do it, the ripple begins. People feel the difference. They stop expecting a replica and start witnessing a revelation.
So ask yourself, are you living someone else's story, or are you brave enough to write your own?
Because at the end of the day, power doesn't remember echoes, it remembers architects.
Next week, we go into a law that's all about control through rhythm. Law 42, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. It's about disrupting power structures at the root, not the surface.
A shift from legacy to leadership, from identity to influence. We're going deep.
So remember, if you want to lead, don't follow. And if you want to last, don't replicate.
Be bold enough to step off the path, even if it's paved in gold, and lay down stones of your own.